Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. And we've just seen the heads of the intelligence services testify before the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee about allegations of Russia trying to weigh on the U.S. elections. The head of the FBI, James Comey, saying it's an active investigation. We're talking about it in the company of Phil Lohaus, defense and national security analyst at the American Enterprise Institute. Also with us from Washington, we welcome back Jay Marquez, senior fellow at the Progressive Policy Institute. And from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Republican strategist Ed Podzuoli here in the studio, digital strategist Raina Stamboliska. We were just listening before the break to Jim Marquez talk about how the president is spinning it all. And the last Friday at the White House press conference, in the company of the German chancellor, well, Donald Trump deflected, again, those earlier claims that British intelligence had participated in the wiretapping of Trump Tower, but he still stood by his story. At one point, he even took Angela Merkel as his witness.
As far as wiretapping, I guess, by this past administration, at least we have something in common, perhaps.
All right, a little dig, Raina Stamboliska, at the fact that, the NSA on Barack Obama's watch was caught spying on Angela Merkel's phone.
This is very offensive for any foreign country. However, the more we are seeing things evolve, the more I'm under the impression that this sort of offensive eavesdropping, routine eavesdropping, is becoming the new normal.
All right, there's two things. There's the eavesdropping.
Yeah.
Spies spy, and they spy on each other.
Yeah.
But here in this case, he's criticizing the NSA.
Well, it's his legacy. I don't know. What does he mean when he says words? It's incredibly difficult for a lot of people, including me, to read what President Trump is actually saying and is actually meaning when you attack your own intelligence community in such a brutal and ruthless way, and you belittle their work all day long while you are supposed to govern with them. I don't know how to read through this, we know that different agencies, intelligence agencies, are eavesdropping on different diplomats within the homeland and abroad. This is by law in the US. Whether you like it or not, that's legal in the US, right? From there, to get into a crazy fear-mongering thing and put this forward as your only connection point to one of the most influential foreign leaders, that to me is really very difficult to read through. And
Phil Lohaus, explain to us here, what's the strategy when Donald Trump says something like that in the company of Angela Merkel?
Right. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't know if there really is a strategy per se. I think that was his attempt at humor. I think we should remember that Donald Trump came to be known to most Americans as an entertainer, and he does have a sense of humor that may be off point, but I think that's how he was trying to diffuse the situation. And I'm not justifying that. I think that, he still has some growing to do in terms of realizing that as President of the United States, everything he says is taken literally and analyzed. But in this particular case, I think he was making a joke that obviously fell flat, and Angela Merkel, judging from the reaction on her face, was not entertained by the joke.
Jim Marquez, do you agree that perhaps we're reading too much into this?
No, I don't think that Donald Trump has much of a strategy, and I think that whether it's issues about trying to smear his predecessor or trying to forge these really weird comments vis-a-vis Angela Merkel, or retweet or talking about baseless claims that the British were somehow involved in spying, just continue to underline the very fundamental point that a lot of us have known for a long time, that Donald Trump neither has the temperament nor the intellect to be president of the United States. It's quite clearly that simple. We keep talking about maybe there's some moment when he'll grow up and realize how serious this has got to be all taken. I don't know that that point will ever come, and I think that that's something that is extremely concerning, especially amid these accusations of continued collusion between his campaign and Russia, that should really cause Americans not to sleep very well at night.
Ed Pozzuoli?
Yeah, I guess, Jim, you can't say those words enough about collusion. I get that. That's from Democratic talking points. But look, the bottom line is that just last week, Russian hackers were arrested and indicted by the Trump Justice Department for hacking. And so on one hand, you have a law enforcement who is active versus what you had under Obama. Remember, what should be concerning to your listeners and your viewers is that during President Obama's time, Russia invaded Georgia, annexed Crimea, supported rebels in eastern Ukraine, and took a leading role in the Syrian conflict. And the United States took a back seat off the world stage on all of those issues. And now you have a president who wants to at least engage the Russians head to head and have United States foreign policy be more muscular based upon the budget that he presented to Congress. Now, I will say some of these things are simply distractions from Trump achieving what I believe is an agenda that is supported by a large majority of the American people. And so that includes reforming and repealing Obamacare, making American defense stronger, and allowing for the American growth through deregulation of overhang from the federal
is American
government
defense
and lowering
stronger when
taxes.
is American defense stronger when you're basically taking pot shots in the company of a foreign leader at your own intelligence services?
No, but the issue really is it's a change in attitude about the way the intelligence services understand something. Some of the pot shots that you're seeing through these leaks of intelligence services are Obama appointee overhangs. And so until that gets flushed out, you're going to have some of that. And that's just a fact. Now, I don't believe that's very American, and I don't believe that's in keeping with the intelligence community's obligations to the President of the United States. Whether you like it or not, President Trump was elected, and he is the rightful president. And so does he have his foibles? The answer is yes. Does he have a clear vision, however, of America and where it needs to go? The answer is yes. And do most Americans support it? The answer is yes.
All right.
Oh, now hold on there. That's a very important point, because let's not forget that Donald Trump lost the popular vote by over 2%, 3 million votes. And currently his approval rating stands at about 37%, which is the lowest ever for any president at this point, so young into an administration.
All right,
so when you say that Donald Trump is supported by the vast majority of American population, that is fundamentally incorrect.
All right, let's go back to this issue of for instance, let's start with what was just mentioned there by Ed, which is those arrests that took place last week. Actually, they weren't arrests; they were indictments. Handed up. There was one arrest took place in Canada. Two senior Russian intelligence officers among the four who are accused of having hacked those accounts at Yahoo a few years back. What did that teach you, Ron, about Russia and the way Russia operates?
Well, it's very difficult to navigate those waters in the sense that, like, amongst those four people, two were for hire. I mean, who doesn't hire, people to do things? So what can you learn out of this? That people were hungry and they were paying well, they were paid well to do whatever they did, or they didn't. Like, if we are going on the ground of cyber, of cybersecurity, of IT, etc., and information security, we are going on a very, very tricky ground in the sense that attribution of attacks, from a technical point of view, is one of the most difficult things to do. And generally, especially on that level of political, polarization and sensitivity to issues, attribution is made mostly on political grounds.
So picking up on what you're saying,
yeah,
this active investigation that James Comey was talking about before congressional leaders, at the end of the day, how easy or hard will it be to prove that Russia really did hack the Democratic National Committee?
Well, I mean, they are different things. If we read carefully what the DHS and the FBI put forward, they published 2 reports, one in 2016 and like end of October, if I remember correctly, and the other one in January of this year. There was technical evidence, from both private and public actors that some technical intrusive techniques can be attributed to groups affiliated with specific Russian intelligence committees. This is one thing. Let's accept this as a fact. Fine. From there, how do you stretch, to say there is a causality, there is a cause and consequence, and say Russians hacked the DNC, thus Trump won? Like the thus is unknowable. I mean, how, what do you need? Imagine all the things you need to make thus clear and,
In part 1 of our discussion, Jim Marquez, you talked about the steady drip that has come out regarding the Russian hacking. At the end of the day, listening to what Rania just said, you might be disappointed if there isn't that smoking gun.
Well, we already know for a fact, based on the intelligence community's report from January, that unquestionably Russia was behind hacking. They were doing so to undermine the democratic process and our faith in our democratic institutions, to hurt Hillary Clinton and to help Donald Trump. That is the assessment of the intelligence community without question. So at a very minimum, if we never find out anything else, that is an extremely serious charge that all Americans should take, that should shake us to our very core and cause us to ask serious questions of our governing institutions about how we can prevent this from ever happening again, and what is going on in the future.
But you just heard, Jim, you just heard Ed say that a lot of this is leaks by people who are left over from the Obama administration. How do you put to bed that kind of an explanation?
I find it fascinating that every time the Trump administration lies about something, whether it's Michael Flynn or whether it's Jeff Sessions in his own testimony saying that, nope, there was no discussion with the Russians, the leak occurs immediately thereafter to disprove a lie that a member of the Trump administration has said. So if there are leaks that fundamentally change our understanding of the state of affairs because the White House and the American administration or members that purport to be members of it have lied to the American people, then in that case, leaks are fully supportable. I fully support the idea that members of our intelligence community, members of the administration who understand the risks involved in leaking, and certainly it is a crime, and they know that they could be prosecuted because of it, have decided that this is the better part of valor, and it is important to get that information out there so that the American people really understand what's going on here.
Phil Lohaus, let me ask you on this, because morale can't be very high these days inside those intelligence agencies.
No, that's right. And I just, I think that's just piggybacking off of what my fellow discussant is saying, that's kind of where this conversation is going. And once we say, oh, well, sometimes it's justifiable to do a leak, I mean, let's not mince words. That's basically justifying the commission of a felony. And I think that that's something that we need to take very seriously. And these leaks are not justified, but I think, that to my earlier point, the morale in the intelligence community is so low that, and that's the point I made before about them trying to get to the president and finding some way of having him listen. Look, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I would be very surprised if a lot of the things that have come out in leaks haven't first been briefed to the president. And the intelligence community then is not getting the reaction that they think that a rational president would give them. And, the part of this falls on the intelligence community, too, to change its approach for the new president. I mean, the Obama administration liked its briefings a very specific way. They used the intelligence community in a very specific way. And there's a new president in town, and obviously there's going to be a different set of priorities and a different style that's looked highly upon. But to say that these leaks are actually okay, I mean, that's where I kind of have to stop, because it's not okay to do these leaks. I mean, these leaks, a lot of times these are American lives at stake. These are sensitive methods and techniques that take years and billions of dollars to develop. And the better way for this to go through would be for them to contact their representative, to contact Congress, that kind of thing, not just go to the New York Times as a short circuit way to get around things that they don't like.
Let's hear from another precinct, Russia's lower house of parliament, hitting back after a Justice Department probe of the television station RT America for potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registrations Act. It's now launching its investigation into U.S. news media that operate in Russia.
In my opinion, there are some political forces in Washington that don't care as much about demonizing Russia as putting in doubt the legitimacy of the elected US President Donald Trump. Because at the moment, spreading fabrications about hackers providing Trump's victory means a lack of respect to American citizens who made a decision that they wanted to change.
What's slightly troubling listening to that, Ed Podzwoli, is that it sounds like a Donald Trump tweet, that line of reasoning.
No, but what I would say is that just because it was said by the Russians doesn't make it not true. The basic premise around progressives who constantly want to harp on this issue without any evidence whatsoever is that the American people were duped by something the Russians did, and therefore that's the only way they can explain why Hillary Clinton lost. And she was a miserable candidate. Republicans and Democrats alike rejected the more mainframe or mainstream candidates, in Jeb Bush as an example, and Hillary Clinton. But the bottom line is even Democrats had a strong challenge from the left of all places. A left socialist nearly knocked Hillary Clinton out of the nomination run. How can you blame that on the Russians? She was a weak candidate, and now they want to blame the alleged, the American people are not smart enough to make their own choices. American people had plenty of this election. This election cycle was never ending.
So do you, hang on, so do you agree, with the Vice President of the Duma that these are fabrications that are being spread about hackers providing Trump's victory?
Yes, I agree with the conclusion. I don't believe the hackers, the idea whether or not Russians hacked the DNC, in fact, there's evidence they tried to hack the RNC as well. But I don't know if it's the Russians or not. I would leave that to the evidence to tell me that. But put that aside for a second. Whether that impacted the result of the election and changed an American's mind on who to vote for is a far cry. I think your guest who's sitting in the studio had the right approach. You cannot make that leap about something happening with Russians trying to manipulate whatever they did and somehow affecting the actual result of the election, or some Americans vote in the middle of the country about whether they're going to support Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. That's just flat out wrong.
Jim Markakis, what concrete proof are you looking for at this point? What are you expecting to come out of that FBI investigation?
Quite simply, I don't know. I would like to just simply see an open and transparent process. Nothing more, nothing less. Let the facts take us where they may. Let's see all the evidence. Let's let the professionals draw their professional conclusions. And then if there's nothing there, then there would be nobody happier than me, because it would mean the President of the United States was not compromised by one of our chief geopolitical adversary. That would be the best possible outcome. But the American people also deserve all the answers to know that if there was collusion between Trump's campaign or his entourage or his business interests, let's not forget that Donald Trump Jr. said in 2008 that Russian assets make up a disproportionately large percentage of the Trump organization's assets, that those are deeply disturbing things, and we should just know all the facts, pure and simple. It's not about the election. It's not about how Hillary won. It's not about how Trump lost. Or Hillary lost and Trump won. At the very base,
you got to get that part of it straight.
What are the fundamental institutions of our democracy, and are they secure? And can we put confidence in them going forward? So that's why we need an open and transparent investigation.
Reina Stamboliskia, let me ask you, because we're 5 weeks away from an election, presidential election here in France. There's going to be a general election in Germany in September. There are candidates who are friendly with Moscow, those who are not. What do you think? Is it completely different from what we saw in the United States?
Europe is a different playground compared to the US in many, ways. There is an ongoing consortium of media that's called Crosscheck, that's looking into misinformation spread by different actors. And it's interesting. So I can tell a bit of a few things about this because I'm doing the research into how influence operates in Europe and specifically in France with respect to the elections, in the run-up. What we can see so far is that if we look at the external influence to that election, it's mostly pro-Trump, alt-right groups. There is very little direct Russian meddling, if you want.
Pro-Trump alt-right groups that are campaigning for who?
For Marine Le Pen.
For Marine Le Pen.
Yeah, so you have
the far right.
Very interesting dynamics going on where pro-Trump, alt-right / whatnot trolls are helping, or nurturing campaigns here to promote Marine Le Pen because she seems to be the right fit for, a French counterpart to President Trump. So this is so far, I'm not neglecting at all, far from there, Russian very consistent effort to, get through a specific narrative. But, we shouldn't also, lose sight of the fact that every country is trying to push its narrative when it has operations in a different country. Let me play the devil's advocate. Where is not the US trying to push an agenda? Every country is doing that.
All right. We're going to leave it there, but you're primed the pump for another discussion, which we'll no doubt have soon. Rania Stamboliska, I want to thank you. I want to thank Phil Lohaus, Jim Arquetis in Washington, Ed Podzwali for being with us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. So media and social media tracking what's going on in Congress. Let's take a look at some of the headlines. The Washington Post. Comey says there is no information to support Trump's wiretapping claims. That's what they're leading on. Of course, lots of information coming out, being filtered by the media as it emerges. FBI looks for Trump's aides' Russia ties. Now, some critical, for example, Peter Dow, a former Clinton campaign advisor. New York Times and Washington Post both leading with Comey undercutting Trump's wiretapping claim. This is the wrong focus. It's Comey confirming Trump-Russia investigation. So for him, that is the key element
Again, those
emerging.
competing narratives.
Right, exactly. And if you go, speaking of competing narratives, you have competing news media as well. This is Breitbart.com, largely seen as a mouthpiece for the Trump campaign. And they are, in fact, leading on the FBI investigating Russian interference into the election. So even if even Breitbart are covering it, it shows that it's unavoidable, I guess. This Donald Trump has been tweeting, of course, throughout the day as well. Some saying the fact that he's tweeting so much today shows that he's perhaps worried. James Clapper and others stated that there is no evidence the President of the United States colluded with Russia. This story is fake news, that all caps fake news that we're getting so used to seeing. And everyone knows it. The Democrats made up and pushed the Russian story as an excuse for running a terrible campaign. And the real story the Congress, the FBI and others should be looking into is the leaking of classified information. I've seen lots of criticisms of that particular mark online. As you might expect, it's generating a lot of debate. Every Republican today, this is one person who is not a Republican, we don't care Russia helped elect Trump. We just want those who made it known found. In other words, the leakers. So you can see that it's generating...
Not sure about the grammar and the syntax, but I get the point.
The point being, right, that the focus is maybe misplaced. We hear you've seen images such as that doing the rounds of social media. I suppose it speaks for itself. and the famous slogan, "Lock her up," which was so oft repeated by Donald Trump supporters throughout the campaign, now being turned back on Donald Trump. Lock him up, and indeed many wondering, could this lead to impeachment proceedings? I am calling for a complete and total shutdown on Donald Trump running the country until we can figure out what's going on. Lots of comments like that online as well. Of course, I don't think we have time to show many of them. Lots of people defending Donald Trump too. It's as polarized as ever on social media when it comes to the US president.
All right. It's polarized, by the way, in the French election. And tomorrow we'll be debriefing that candidates debate at the same time.
That's right.
James Creedon, many thanks. I want to thank our panel. I want to thank you for joining us here at the France 24 debate.